Hi, and welcome to the Same 24 Hours podcast. I'm Meredith Atwood, author of the book, The Year of No Nonsense. I'm a former attorney turned writer, speaker, and Ironman triathlete. Although right now, all I really like to do is lift weights. We all have the same 24 hours, but it's what we do in those hours that leads to our greatest health, happiness, and success. It's my goal to crack the code on a life of less nonsense so we can all make the most of our 24 hours. So let's get started. To this live recording of the Same 24 Hours podcast. I'm very excited about our guest today. Inde Calhoun is here. Hello, my dear.
Hello. Lovely to be with you on this rainy day.
How are you?
It's a hard question to answer. It's fine.
I really like to lead with the hard ones.
I'm already stumped. I'm fine. You know, it's all fine, isn't it?
Yeah. It's all fine. That's going to be the word of 2020. Everything's fine.
Everything's fine. Yeah.
Everything is fine. So thank you all for joining. This is super exciting. I started reading, I was listening to Inde's book on Audible. I don't know, 4 or 5 months ago. And just like, this book is me. This is my life. How is she in my head? Oh my gosh. So I'm 40. I'm technically on the cusp of Gen X and millennial, but at 1979, but I am definitely a Gen Xer.
Claim you. You're definitely at 79. You're right in there.
Yeah. All right. Because what is Gen X? Like, what is the official?
So different people have different ranges, but the Pew Research Center says 1965 to 1980 as birth years, but I've seen up to 1984 as a very plausible Gen X contingent.
That's right. So her book, Why We Cant Sleep, let's just think about that title for a brief minute. The women's new midlife crisis, I believe, is the subtitle. And I thought, oh my gosh, what is the old midlife crisis? And that just opens up the whole can of worms, right? I mean, I don't even know where to start with this, Inde, because it is, first of all, the book, if you haven't read it and you are in Generation X, it is just an incredibly researched book, first of all, but just one that I feel with all of my soul in a lot of ways. So let's lead with Gen X. Let's just lead you kind of diagnose the years of people that are stuck in Gen X. But what is the difference between Gen Xers, the main difference that you see between the generation that came before, which I believe is baby boomers, right? And then millennials. So why are we different from those two generations?
Yeah, so we're called the Jan Brady of generations sometimes because we are overlooked very often. We hear so much about the boomers and the millennials and not so much about Gen X, who were the latchkey kids of the 70s and 80s. We were the children of divorce. 40% of our parents divorced. And, we grew up in a time of really high crime and sort of a dangerous era and a broke era for America, while being told, especially as girls, reach for the stars. You can be anything, even president. It's going to be, world is your oyster. Have it all, do it all. And what I heard from a lot of the women I interviewed is that they felt that message had set them up to feel just really disappointed by their lives in middle age.
But no one's really connecting that, though, right? That's something I kind of got from your book is as you interviewed people, women were like, yeah, I'm disappointed. And it's almost like we hadn't made the connection between this expectation and you can have it all and what that actually looks like at 40, 45.
Well, so many of the women that I talked to, they told me that they felt like they just weren't working hard enough, or they just hadn't found the right life coach or read the right self-help book or done the right thing. And that was why they didn't have everything they thought they would have. So if they didn't have a family and they thought they would, they must not have tried hard enough. They must have been too picky. If they didn't have the career they wanted, they must not have leaned in enough. And it was this self-blame that I really took issue with in the book, this idea that we didn't come up in no context. There were forces at work beyond our control. We've had a lot of rough luck in terms of the economy, and in terms of a lot of other things that I go into in the book.
Okay. So I got a chat that someone says they're having a hard time hearing you, Ada. Can you check your microphone? I can hear you because I have you booming on a professional mic, but it may be that the Zoom microphone is not.
Okay, if I turn this up, is this louder?
Is that better?
Is that deafening for you?
It's deafening for, okay, everyone says yes. I record on 2 separate tracks, so I can work out any blips later, but I want to make sure everyone can hear you now. Okay, good. Amy said yes, that works. Perfect.
Okay, good. Okay.
All right, we're in business. Okay, I don't know where we were though. I was like, oh no, technical difficulties, and then I fall off. So where were we?
Gen X, hard road to hoe, and then women blaming themselves. So a lot of you can be anything, you can do anything became somehow in their brain, I must do everything, I must do it all perfectly, and there's no room for error.
No pressure. It's fine.
Everything is fine. Once again,
everything is fine. And you bring up that ad, that perfume ad that I know Brene Brown brings up in her vulnerability talk, or one of them, about the whole like work hard, I'm everything, make you feel like a man, all this stuff. Like we grew up thinking, oh, we can be anything. But where did we get the message that we have to be everything? Like, because like, where does that come from?
Yeah. So the commercial that you're referencing, I think a lot of women who grew up in that era can sing it even now. And it was, you can bring home the bacon and fry it up in the pan and never let you forget you're a man. Right. So it was like these kind of 3 things. Yeah. And it's like, you look at it now and it's completely insane. But I just think there was this kind of brainwashing campaign, and that was the most obvious example. But you look at the movies of the time, you look at a lot of the messages we were getting, and you see this mantra of, you can have a career, a really powerful career, you can have a family, and you can be sexy, and you can do all those 3 things effortlessly and be a fantastic parent, of course, to your children, and it'll be great. It's just going to be great, and easy, and then nobody gave this generation any support. So a lot of women entered college without anybody paying for college, for example. And I heard one story after another of people working straight through school, having to really compromise what they wanted to do in terms of, like, they wanted to go for a master's, they couldn't afford it, and then graduating into recession, and then at every point hitting the .com bust, and September 11th, and the housing crisis. And the housing crisis, of course, hit Gen X harder than any other generation, because it was right when we were in that zone of like, oh yes, finally, here is our piece of the American dream, and then it came crashing down. So I think there's been this bad luck for our generation.
This bad looming. Yeah, no, that really rings very true. And I think something that was interesting, I was doing a book event, and this older lady came up to me after I'd done my talk, and she said, you know what's wrong with your generation? And I thought, everything I just said, like, did it hit a nerve with you? And she said, you think you have it so hard. And I was so stunned for a minute, just because she was probably in her 70s, okay? And all I was so stunned, I didn't know what to say. And then, of course, she walked off, and I thought of all the things I wanted to say, like, you don't know what it, but it was just so interesting, because what is the divide there? Because I feel that a lot from other generations, especially the baby boomers. Like, you have everything. What are you complaining about? I mean, even my own mother at dinner one night, I had 2 kids, like under 3. I was a litigating attorney trying to hold it all together. We were paying a nanny like 3/4 of my salary out the door to raise my children and teach them to tie their shoes. And I was sitting at a Mexican restaurant. I remember it like yesterday. And my mom goes, I really don't see what your problem is. You have a nanny. And so it's not just this woman at the book signing. My own mother was like, what is your problem? You have a nanny. What is that? What is that about?
Well, I think it feels difficult. I don't know why, for a lot of people to admit that other generations have different different problems. Like, and I think I try really hard in the book to say it's not a competition. Like,
Right.
millennials have a lot of problems and boomers had a lot of problems. I look at our mother's generation and what they had to deal with in terms of sexism in the workplace. It's like comically, horribly absurd, like what they dealt with. And then millennials, it is true, like they're having, I mean, think about people graduating now. I mean, my son's
Right.
graduating middle school theoretically next month on the internet. Like, it's horrible. So it's not a competition about who had it harder. It's just about what is the specific challenge for us compared to them. And I think in this case, you know, if our mothers and grandmothers worked, they worked 9 to 5. If they had families, they had them when they were 22 and not when they were 32 or 42. And so what we're dealing with when we're in our 40s is just different than what they dealt with in their 40s. They had an empty nest. You know, they still had perimenopause. That's eternal, unfortunately. But it was just a
We're
different.
never getting out of that one. Yay, periods.
It was a different list of challenges then than it is now. And the thing that I describe in the book is this sense of being overwhelmed. I mean, women of this generation, like if you talk about working a full-time job as a lawyer and having little kids, this is new. It's just a different situation. It's not necessarily worse. It's worse in some ways, especially in terms of whether or not you get any rest at all. But it's just different. It's new. And I think we should talk about the unique challenges that we're facing.
Yeah, you raised such a good point. I mean, women like to compete with each other and decide who has it worse and who has it better and who's doing it better. And I mean, that's a big part of our generation. And I noticed you brought it up in the book, is that we're not just competing for, like, maybe prior generations were competing for, hey, I have a nicer house and it's clean. But now it feels like we're competing with everything. And I think you raised that in your book, that it's like everything: job, house, car, number of kids, not kids, pets, husband, not, you know, all of it is just on display. And maybe that's part of the Facebook generation. And that's something we will share with millennials, I think, that just that everything's out there. But what did your research show about the comparison culture and how seeing what other people are doing and how that ties into our expectations and how it's all linked?
Yeah, so I had a lot of the therapists I interviewed, and I love getting to call therapists and basically get free therapy by interviewing them for my book.
That's what this book really was, right? Like, let's be real. How do I fix this midlife crisis?
I mean, it's not even a joke. Like, I really went into it having a super rough time, and I came out of it feeling so much better. So there is that. But a lot of the therapists I talked to said that part of it is social media. It's just this constant stream of images of other people succeeding, that even if we're conscious of it, even if we think, I know that's not real, I know they're using filters, I know that marriage isn't as sunny and glorious as it looks, you know, with them sitting on the beach holding hands, there's something about it that gets into us somehow, that where we start to think that that's real and that what we have is lesser. And I think there is this tendency, maybe because of how we grew up or because we're women or whatever it is, to sort of see what we don't have and not what we do. And I think that comparison culture that social media encourages really plays into it, and it can be very toxic. And also I think it's very lonely. You know, a lot of the women that I interviewed, and I know this from personal experience, wind up with this feeling of sadness, like after being subjected to this battery of images of other people. There's something about it that's just like shameful. And so in the book, I try to talk about what's really behind all those sunny smiles and beach pictures, is like everybody's dealing with trying to be a human being in the world.
Right. One of the words that I hate most in our language, and you may like it, I don't think you do, just based off of your research in the book, but is the idea of balance. And I have found that balance is just another way of shaming people into not handling their load appropriately, or not being able to do it all. Like, if you don't have balance, you're not doing all the things you should be doing, because this was your opportunity to have it all, and you're not doing a good job with what you have, and you have it all. And it just takes me back to me, like, you have a nanny, and I'm like, oh my God, I'm going to die. You know, it's just that dialogue in my head. So where do you fall on that word, balance?
I think it's really fun. I mean, I think what you're describing rings very true to me. And I think it is this idea that that it's not looking at the bigger problem. I think that's the issue I have with all of this, the self-help and like mindfulness and all this stuff that's great, sure, but the idea that it's going to fix everything if you get the right diet or the right exercise routine or the right balance metric. No, the issue is we're trying to do a ton of stuff with very little support. And that is the problem. And that means it's going to be hard no matter what. And that we should maybe try to find some more support or try to do less, or at least not be surprised if we're really exhausted.
So what does support look like? What did your research show as far as how people that how women in this midlife crisis, how they got better? What is the way out? Because I remember like halfway through your book, I was like, oh my God, okay, I feel all of this with everything. I really hope she comes up with some solutions soon, because you felt it. I mean, you felt everything in the book as being a midlife woman. And so what does that support look like? And that was one of the things you obviously pointed out in the book, is like with support. But what does that look like for most women?
Yeah, so it looks like this sort of. I mean, this is one of, I think what you're doing is it's really important. I think getting women to talk honestly about their lives and talk to one another and really look at it and look at what their expectations are and whether or not they're realistic. I think that's number one. I think finding a good gynecologist is really important. I think that this stage of life is very hard on women's bodies in ways that a lot of doctors don't even fully understand yet, because the research has been so scanty. I think it's really important to pay attention to that part of it. Get a financial planner, make your partner do the dishes and cook dinner half of the, like whatever it is, like anything that's going to make your life a little easier and more plausible given all the things you're trying to do. And also just recognizing that this is a phase of life that is rough on a lot of people. And it does end.
Did you say it doesn't end?
It does.
Oh,
it never
doesn't
ends.
end. There's the good
end.
news. It doesn't. It doesn't. And one of the challenges that you mention in the book is how we're also often the sandwich generation, because we had kids later, and then we have aging parents, and all of a sudden we're taking care of two sets of children, older ones and the younger ones, and that, I mean, obviously it gets better when things grow older. And anytime I have a client who's got littles, like 4 and 6, oh, my kids are 4 and 6 and I need to exercise more, I'm like, no, you just need to survive this phase. It gets better. Because it's so hard. And I do think that you hit the nail on the head, that talking about it. And if you've had kids that are 4 and 6 and you see someone that in your network that has 4 and 6-year-olds, go talk to them, go tell them, and I think you're right on that. So if anyone has any questions for Ada while she's online, please feel free to raise your little internet hand or type it in the chat. And this is a great opportunity. Let's talk about dreams. You pose a question. Or you posed a question that was frequently brought up in your interviews, which was, when do I give up on my dream? Like, I had this dream when I was 20, and then I had a couple of kids, got married, or didn't have kids, like whatever. But now I'm 45, and when do I cry uncle and say, I give up? Like, where do you fall in the dream spectrum? And because that is such a big, big topic in my life right now. Just, I believe in never stopping, and you may have to revisit them and edit them, but because I'm not going to be a swimsuit model at this point, so just edit, but maybe model. I mean, maybe for the senior magazine, it's fine. But it doesn't mean I have to give up on the dream, or do we? Like, talk about dreams a little bit.
Yeah, well, I think it is true that as we get older and make choices, that other choices follow away, right? So if we have kids, it means we don't ever again get to not be a mother, right? Like, that's done. We can't be single forever if we get married. Like, once you start making choices, the field narrows for what's possible. So I think maybe it's about, like you said, editing dreams, revising dreams. There was this idea of the American dream for so long, about how every generation was going to do better than the generation before it. And that was true for a long time, but it's not true now. Generation X was the first generation that earned less than its parents, and millennials, it's going to be the same situation, probably Gen Z also. And so we need new dreams that are not that dream, this dream of like endless prosperity. There's one statistic in the book that's only 1 in 4 women from about Generation X will out earn her father. So
Wow.
it's just not, it's not possible. And I think we should face up to that and figure out what new dreams we can dream that are realistic, but also will bring us joy.
What was the biggest regret that you came across when you were speaking with us, these all the midlife women? What was the sort of the theme of regret? What was the biggest regret?
Oh gosh, there were a lot. I would say, I talked to a lot of women who had either, I mean, it's funny because I talked to a lot of women who had families who regretted not doing more with their careers, who got into their 40s or 50s and said, like I raised these 3 kids, but I've only worked part-time. I always thought I was going to have the working girl office, in corporate America, and it didn't happen. And they would say something like, what did I do wrong? And then meanwhile, I'd interview another woman, maybe the same day, from a different part of the country who had the fancy office and had never found a partner or had children. And she would say, like, what did I do wrong? I didn't have a family. And I always thought I would. And now I'm running out of time, or I feel like I'm out of time. And, I think the question is that regret on them, or was this idea that you were going to be able to do everything all at once with this very narrow window of time? Was it realistic to put that on girls' shoulders?
Yeah. And where does the grass is greener fall in your research? Because I mean, I find that people that have children are looking at our single friends like, wow, your life looks a little bit more fun than mine at the moment. And then, you have people that wanted kids, couldn't have them, didn't want them, and all of that. I mean, I feel like children is such a interesting topic amongst women. Like everyone feels very polarized, like the mothers, the non-mothers, the ones who never wanted or couldn't, but how much of it is grass is greener, and that's just part of our nature?
I feel like someone should do a Generation X Freaky Friday movie where this mother of 3 young children gets swapped, with the childless woman who has the high-powered job. And because I do see that so much, I've felt it myself, and I've seen it in a lot of friends, this idea that like, oh, if only I could like go date again, or if only I could, could cuddle up with a family and watch my family and watch a movie, like from my single friends. It's all, it's all wonderful and all terrible, right? I think that that's something that's hard for us to hold, this idea that nothing is perfect.
Right. It's like during the quarantine, everyone that's alone is like really alone, and they're miserable because they haven't had human contact. And then all of us that are quarantined with people are like, are you kidding me? Like, I would give anything to be alone. I mean, that's the most recent one I can see.
Yeah, I'm hiding in my son's bedroom. That's why I have the country backdrop on, because
although I'd love how old's your son?
He's 13.
Oh, let's see what's in his room.
Okay.
Let's do it different.
Okay.
Let's do it different. And okay, let's see what's on the shelf there.
Okay, that's a Star Wars mask. There's the pinata. There's like a chess award. There's a lot of books about castles. Yeah.
That's awesome. 13. Oh my
13.
goodness. All right. Suzanne says, hi, Suzanne. As an older woman, 58, I don't think there's just one sandwich generation. I think there's a time in your life you are sandwiched. It will pass. Your parents will die. Your children will grow up. It's just a period that you are sandwiched by taking care. Yeah. We're just sandwiches.
We are sandwiches. I will say that is totally true. And that our mothers, I mean, I remember my mother going through this, when I was a surly teenager, where her parents were dying and she was flying to Texas all the time. And she was definitely in it. What is a little different this time around is that our generation waited to have kids. So you have a lot more women who are in their 40s now with young children at the same time that their parents need a lot of care. And that, it's a slight difference. And also, we were born during a baby bust, which means there are many fewer people there to help. So, AARP publishes these numbers about how many available caregivers there are for anybody who needs care. So if a few years ago it was 7 people, siblings and cousins and friends who could look after someone who was aging and needed help, now it's, I think, 4 into one, and I think it's going to be 3-to-1 soon. So if there's only 3 people, that means it's much more likely that you, while you're raising your little kids, are going to have to go bring food to your mom. It's just a tightening. It's like a panini version of the sandwich, but it is not to take away from the experiences that our mothers and grandmothers had, because of course they did the same thing.
Panini. Yeah. Speaking of paninis, the best sandwich maker is that just old school thing that makes sandwiches into triangles, which I feel like is our generation, because the sandwich maker, it's not the panini press. It literally just, and then you bite into it and it's like a hot pocket and burns your mouth. But I just thought about that when you said panini.
Are they on the internet? I should look for that.
Of course. But I think we have a Cuisinart brand. I don't know. It's not that it matters, but it's like it makes little square hot sandwiches, but very much panini, sort of, but tighter. The sandwiches are tighter. Yeah. So one of the things that struck me as funny, I think I laughed out loud when I was listening to your book, is you said something about how are we going to have the opportunity to just go on this eat, pray, love walkabout? We have responsibilities. Someone has to be, with the kids, with the house, with whatever. What do we do about that? Like you said, find support, and we have to let go of some responsibilities and things. But what is going to loosen the panini press additionally? Like, what can we do individually? Because a lot of it is on us. Like, we become like the one who has to do everything. We took that message to heart, and then now we hang it over our head like a dark cloud. Like, well, no one else can do this. No one else can do it the way I do it. Yeah. So what is some internal work that maybe you've done or seen people do that we can do on ourselves to alleviate that mental burden? Because I think it starts there, doesn't it?
Well, I mean, something that I've heard from a lot of women who are happier is that they subscribe to the better done than perfect school, so that if they don't want to cook dinner every night, then they say okay, you're going to do it one night, and to their partner, and their kid is going to do it one night. And if they're eating, hot pocket sandwich, whatever it is, if it's takeout, if it's anything, they just have to be it's delicious, done. It's done. I didn't do it. It's wonderful. And I think that is hard, especially for our generation, raised with a sense of we have to cross every T and dot every I and be perfect, to let go of that. But the people I know who are able to do it are happier. I will say that.
Yeah. What were some of the biggest surprises in your research? Because I know you went into this with your own sort of, I just turned 40, I'm in a crisis, what are other people doing? So what did your research reveal that really surprised you?
I was really surprised that a lot of women around the country use the same language. Almost every interview that I conducted, and I did a couple hundred in almost every state, they would start by saying, I'm so lucky. I have no reason to complain. I'm definitely not in a crisis. I'll help you because I'm very helpful, but this is not really something that I totally relate to. And then they would proceed to just tell me these stories about how much work they were doing and how much stress they were under and how hard it was, and how their house had gotten foreclosed on because their husband it was just these litanies of hardship, and yet they would minimize it and they would say, but it's not like other people have it way worse. And I'm not saying that's not true, but there was something about that desire to just not own it, or not talk about it, but just to say it's no big deal, that I found very telling.
Yeah, that I found that too. So when I coach women, I have them write a personal narrative of their childhood from age 10 and under. And 80% of the time it starts with, I had a great childhood. And then 20 pages later, they have told me about their childhood. And I'm like, okay, so go back and reread your first line that I had this great childhood. Because there is that sort of softening of or guilt to complain about what we have. And I can see that totally. But I talk about it all the time about that we can't compare suffering like we compare everything else, that if you are hurting, you're still hurting. It doesn't matter how much money is in your bank account.
Yeah. And there's a difference between being grateful and appreciating what privileges you have and that kind of thing, and not whining. Like, I think, you know, there is this, like, you know, if you think about all the movies about middle-aged men that we've been subjected to and all the novels over the years, I mean, just decades and decades of material about how hard it is to be a middle-aged man. And I'm not saying that that's not true. I'm not saying they didn't have it hard or that balding isn't traumatic or any of it. But if you look at what women are trying to do today, as far as caring for a lot of people, contributing to the community, working really hard, making money, while they have their phones blowing up all day long, while they're going through perimenopause and their kids are going through puberty, it's just a new level of exhaustion. And I think we get to talk about that, especially with one another, without it somehow taking away from what other people are experiencing or have experienced.
Yeah, yeah. Well, if anyone has any questions, now's your time to ask. One interviewee said that she just felt like one day that she might just blow it all up. And that was when I really tuned in and listened. I was like, oh yeah, because the thing that runs through my head all the time, and I've talked about this a little bit, but I have this constant, I have to run dialogue that's in my head. Like, okay, well, I gotta get out of here because this place is crazy. Like, the family, the kids, the husband, I'm out. I'm going to leave. And so when you interviewed that individual and she said, I'm just going to blow the whole thing up, I thought, oh, now this is a book I can get behind. How do we do it? How do we blow it all up? But that feeling of being trapped, I think that is a very tangible and relatable feeling to a lot of women. How many people felt trapped in your research? Was that a very common theme?
It was a very common theme, the sense of that, you know, that there was no way out. And, you know, again, like you said, there's no eat, pray, love walkabout that you can go on.
Where's my walkabout?
Where's my walkabout? I want a t-shirt. My friend who's said that, you know, there were so many GoFundMes that she was getting all the time. She said she was going to have a Where's My Villa GoFundMe. It would be like, need a villa.
Yeah, for real. Uh-oh. Let me mute Christina. Oh, there. She's back. Okay.
Hello, Christina. What were we talking about? We had
escaping. How, like, is that the theme? Like, get me out of here.
Here's what I think is interesting about that is a lot of women I've talked to in the last 2 months have said that they felt that the world had just blown up with everything that's happened in the last, you know, couple of months, and that, you know, that now they're out of a job. Now they don't know when they're going to be able to go back to work, or when they're going to be able to even really go outside or see friends or do anything. And that it's given them time to really think about what do they want things to look like on the other side of it, that there is this sense of like everything is up for grabs now.
Yeah. I got a private question. Thank you, Ada. I've not read your book, but your original article was published. When your original article was published, it hit me like a truck. Meredith, your comment on the nanny resonated deeply. How do we do a better job of tuning out some of the negative comments that come from other women who seem to have it all or be able to do it all? I know these statements are not accurate because we never know what happens behind closed doors. Finding support is easier said than done, especially now. I honestly often feel like despite being surrounded by people and family, I do feel alone in these thoughts. Is talking more to others the key? And yes, Meredith, sometimes trapped is accurate. Yeah, do you want to take that one?
Yeah, I mean, and then I'd love to hear what you say. I think that finding other people who you can speak with honestly and who you can laugh with about these things is so important. However you find it, whether it's online or in person, or, you know, it doesn't have to be people in your family. It can be anybody, to not feel alone. And that's one thing that I've found so much in going and doing book events and hearing from people who read the book, was that it made them feel less alone, because it was, even if they didn't even meet the people who were in the book, that these voices sounded like voices in their own heads, and that there was something so soothing about that. And just knowing that there were, even if it was just hundreds, but I know it's a lot more than that, of women who were going through the same things and who could relate. So I think that is incredibly important.
And if you haven't read the book, because you said you read the article, read the book, because there's a constant, Ada does a great job saying one woman from Kansas City says, and direct quotes, and you will relate some of them will hit you like a Mack truck for sure. Like
And
the one who's
in
like,
the audiobook, yeah, I use a bunch of their voices. They're actual, about a dozen of them. They're actual voices.
yeah, your audiobook was great. So my take on this is interesting. I get a lot of, I don't know how you do it. You do it all. And like a lot of people put that on me often. And I am first to say, no, I don't. I don't sleep. And I listed, I'm like, no, I don't have it all. I'm crazy. I just yelled at my kids for existing today. I'm not doing a good job having it all. Like, well, how are you here? Get out of here. And, I try not to portray that because I want people to, just like you said, have this community where they can come to and reach out. And I try to portray the bad days and when I'm really pissed off on social media, or like yesterday was just a hard day. And I posted about that. Like, I'm just having to ride these waves of pain. Yesterday, I was just riding pain. It would like hit me, knock me down. And I don't mean physical pain. I mean like emotional pain. And so I do think that finding support is easier said than done, but just look around too, because it's there. I mean, like my community, it's here. Me, like just email me. I'll tell you what kind of day I'm having. And there are people out there who are telling the truth. And here's what I know. There was a time in my life where I absolutely flipping had it all. And the way that looked for me was a high paying job, 2 perfect children, a house in the suburbs, an SUV, a Louis Vuitton in my front seat, and a suicidal mind. That's what having it all was for me. I wanted to drive my car into a tree. So don't think that the people out there who look like they have it all are really driving. Maybe some of them are, but just understand that, especially reading Ada's book, like you will hear voices that say the same thing. Like, I should be happy. I should feel great. I should. What do you think of that word, by the way? Should.
I mean, I heard it a lot. I'll tell you that. But I would also say, it helps to get like an Ocean's 11 style team in place. So like a gynecologist who knows about menopause, and a financial planner who knows about whatever your particular line of work is. Just anybody a good therapist who you can really talk to and who really sees you. I think once you get an army of people, like a pet sitter, I mean, just like whatever it takes,
Yeah.
that like are people you trust and who have your interests at heart and can help you with that area of your life. I think if you get 3 or 4 or 5 of those people, things can start to turn around very quickly.
Yeah. And if you are running your own business or trying to be an entrepreneur, take advantage of sites like Fiverr and Upwork, or I think is another one, where you can get assistance for relatively inexpensive to help you do some things that are slowly killing you. I have recently done that with the podcast. Only like 6 episodes ago did I offload my audio production. That's how intensely controlling I am about everything. But learn to offload what you can is a big thing too. And that requires releasing some control, which I think is part of our generation too, is trying to control the narrative and control how we look. And we got it. I got it. It's fine. It's fine. So it's important to note in your book that you did look at middle-class women. And Suzanne asked, how did you find the women to interview? So can you speak a little bit about the sample size and who you talked to and why privilege, like where does privilege play a role in that, which I think is an important part of the conversation too?
Yeah, it totally is. So I limited it, like my research, in a couple ways, and one was by age, so late 30s to early 50s. And then class-wise, I felt like, we see so much on TV, like especially reality TV, about rich women and what they're dealing with. So I feel like that's covered. And then I've done a lot of reporting about poor women and women in like marginalized communities who are really suffering. And there are so many issues that they're dealing with. The book would be 5 times longer. And I think they're dealing with all of these things too. And then in addition to that are like a lot of other problems, access to healthcare and other things. So I feel like what I tried to do with this book was just to find a lot of women around the country of all races and from all states, and Republicans and Democrats, and people who go to church and don't go to church, and all those different categories, who all were dealing with some of the same issues around being a woman who was middle-aged. And that was sort of the the main thing. I found them. Well, luckily I was doing that Oprah.com story first. So I was able to like harness the social media for like Oprah.com, which was gigantic. And I got thousands
Like,
of
hey,
responses.
Oprah, do you have any women?
Do you have
Hey.
any women in middle age who like want to talk about their lives? No.
No.
So I got like thousands of responses through that, and I was able to go through them. I turned them into like a Google Doc and then picked out women I wanted to interview. There are a lot of great message boards out there for women of this age, and I plucked a few people from there to reach out to and talk to on the phone. I talked to a lot of my friends of friends, and when I sort of saw that there were certain groups that I wasn't covering enough, I made a concerted effort to find women who fit into those categories.
Yeah. Well, Inde, it's a fantastic book. Like, well done.
Oh, thank you so
just
much.
well done. Well
what
done.
A lovely group of people you have around
Yes,
too.
I do have lovely groups of people around. We have a good community, everyone. Excellent. You can complain here. So what is something that you do in your 24 hours? So this podcast is called The Same 24 Hours, meaning we have the same 24 hours in our day, but that looks different to everyone. So what is something that you do in your 24 hours on a daily basis, especially as midlife? Like, what is keeping you grounded? What is a habit that you've developed or cultivated that really gives you strength right now?
So I have a little shed, like filled with spiders in the yard, but I go out there in the morning and I work on. I'm working on a couple of book projects right now, so I go out with my laptop and my cup of coffee and I sit in my little shed. And it's really wonderful. So now when the weather's not great, I have a little shed of the mind and I pretend I'm in a shed. So.
Shed of the mind. That's funny. So I had Nir Eyal on. He wrote Indistractable. I had him on a couple months ago, and he said that one of the ways to become indistractable in your own household, especially now if you don't have a shed, is to put on a crown or something that lights up, and you can wear it on your head. So when the people come to have requests of you, they see that you have on your flashing crown, and that is to be told when mom has her flashing crown on, you do not talk to her, because even that the mere mention of I have my crown on, don't talk to me, distracts you. So they're told ahead of time. And it's so funny because I started doing that, and before I moved up into the bedroom / now office, I used to work downstairs. And so the kids would come barreling around the corner. My son slides across the floor like Kramer on Seinfeld. Like, that's how he enters the kitchen, like whoosh. And so now I see him like slide in, and he sees I have my crown on, and he'll like tiptoe out. And it definitely gives me that time, but I'm still seeing like the distraction fly across the room. So finally I'm up here, and it seems to work out. But a she shed, cool. Man, wait, is it actually like a she shed, or is it just like
it's like a gardening shed that doesn't have any gardening stuff in it.
Okay.
Like an actual shed. But it's funny because with the crown idea, a friend of mine has like a little nameplate like we'd have in an office.
Yeah.
That she and her husband are both freelance, so they're home all the time. So if she sets the nameplate out on the kitchen table or wherever she is, then that is the signal that she is in the office.
Is it her nameplate like from the office?
Yeah.
Like her name. Oh, that's funny. I didn't know if it said something like do not disturb, but it's like literally her name.
I think it's just her name. Maybe it has a title under it, like officer or something. I don't remember what it was.
Oh, that's funny. I like that. Well, Inde, thank you so much for your time, everyone. Her book, Why We Cant Sleep, the audiobook is excellent. That's what I listened to. And just if you've got any midlife friends, share it with them. And look, we can all create our own communities. All it takes is you and another person, and then to find someone else you like, and then slowly you've got 4 people. Yeah.
Well, and I will say that I've been hearing from so many women who use this book as a tool to have conversations that they weren't otherwise having with their friends about money or their marriages or whatever it was, that it's like a book club that becomes like a midlife crisis, support group.
Yeah. Oh, that's a good idea. Hey, have you read this? Let's go for a walk and talk about it.
Book club. Yeah. Get some wine
club.
and yeah.
That's right. Well, thank you, Inde, everyone. I will post up the recording and share this with any of your friends. And that's a way to get things started. So
thank you, Meredith.
Well, take care, and we'll see you soon. Bye, everyone.
Thank you.